is not terribly effective on people in their 30s and 40s who I mainly encountered during my first trips there. What I need are people in their late teens and 20s whose minds are still open to futurist ideas. So that's what the University of Nepal will be, and our role is to help to figure out how to provide inspiring content so that the people who are trained there have critical thinking skills and are inspired by the universe, black holes and Big Bang and so on. So Arjun, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. So maybe we'll jump right into it. And I think Taryn will go first, and then Nadiya will go second. So Taryn is going to talk about critical thinking. And then Nadiya is going to talk about black holes and I guess a little bit about Big Bang, but mainly black holes. And, inspiring students with astrophysics so they think really big thoughts. So Taryn, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Let me just share my screen. That. And then you can see that.
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. So like Dr. Solez said, I am going to be focusing on critical thinking today, how it is taught, why it matters, especially with a mind towards like healthcare professionals and, the future. Okay. So why is critical thinking important for the future? I am taking my thoughts from this paper, and they define critical thinking as a reflective decision-making process, this thoughtful problem solving about what to believe or do. And they also give this much larger definition that I've tried to kind of graphically represent because reading it is a nightmare. But they say that it's the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully moving from collecting information, gathering information, using that information through the form of conceptualization, application, analysis, etc., and then very purposefully choosing beliefs and actions based on that process. So why does this matter for the future? As we've talked about before in this course, misinformation online continues to be a huge hurdle. One can only predict that this will continue to get more intense as the internet continues to expand. Equipping people with scientific literacy skills, digital literacy skills is all a part of critical thinking. And then we also want to enable people to actually integrate technology into their lives, I have like a whole bunch of automation set up on my phone, and I don't think I would have made helped improve my life in that way if I hadn't been able to kind of think outside the box. And I think that's true for a lot of technology, right? Realizing that there's a problem, thinking of creative ways to solve that problem with technology. All of that encompasses this critical thinking. And lastly, we have talked about Moore's law in this course, I believe, already. And I think that's a huge factor as well for why critical thinking is going to be so important. As these changes accelerate, we can expect not only technological changes and scientific changes, but also social and cultural changes. And having a mind that's primed for problem solving will help actually adapt to these new realities. And of course, as automation and the internet becomes so much bigger and bigger, rote memorization has kind of become a thing of the past, or it could become a thing of the past. there's still a lot of debate amongst teachers what the role of memorization should play in the future, but there's definitely a shift towards emphasizing problem solving and working with data as opposed to just memorizing it. And as we continue to go forward in the future, society continues to get more and more complex, and these problem solving skills are needed to actually deal with the complexities that we're finding ourselves in now. You know, we're living in a global society, and these ways of doing things and ideas are traveling so fast that it can be really difficult to make sense of them. And my last point here is globalization and collaboration. Part of critical thinking is being able to understand your own thoughts and other people's thoughts and what motivate them. And so if you are adept at that and adept at making your thinking transparent, you understand your biases, this can help you actually collaborate across cultures. You can understand who you're talking to better. Oh, I should also mention, if anyone wants to interrupt me, you're more than welcome to, but I can't see you in the chat or on video, so just talk at me, please. And for medical professionals who are responsible for making important judgments, this is more critical than ever. You know, as physicians are getting tasked with not only doing all the things they've always done, but now there are these new layers of technology and change and globalization. You know, these judgments are going to become more and more complicated and nuanced. And so I will be referencing this paper to talk about how critical thinking develops. They did a consensus building exercise where teachers from across the world who are involved in teaching medicine and nursing all came together and kind of reiteratively agreed what these milestones look like. So they divided up into 5 stages. There is the unreflective thinker, the beginning, practicing, advanced, and then accomplished. Each of these 5 stages is associated with all 3 of these different aspects of critical thinking. So the authors say that an individual progresses through these stages as they develop each of these competencies. So the first is metacognition, which is the ability to think about thinking. It includes things like self-awareness, the actual ability to reflect, you know, a social understanding, be able to relate to your peers. It also includes attitudes, which is more like your disposition towards critical thinking, which doesn't seem like it should be a huge caveat, but I think it actually is. You know, critical thinking is really meant to be self-directed and, you know, self-improving. And so you can't help anybody if they don't have the right attitude towards it. So these attitudes might include intellectual humility, you know, acknowledging that you can be wrong, acknowledging that, you know, multiple things can be right at once, perhaps. And then, you know, this curiosity and creativity. And then there are also some cognitive skills that develop as someone progresses in their critical thinking abilities. So people should be able to think analytically and intuitively and know how to bring these together. They should be able to think contextually, think very purposefully, and really the emphasis is on problem solving as opposed to finding, as opposed there being a single memorizable right answer. So I'm going to go through each of the 3 individually now. I've given you a little graphic for metacognition because I think it's probably the most abstract of the 3 components. If you're not experienced in metacognitive thoughts, it is very surreal to think about thinking, but it makes a lot of sense when we actually break it down. So this is just an example of, 2 different types of thinking. So you have divergent thinking, which is a lot more imaginative. You go from questions to ideas, and you take those ideas and do something with them. But there's also convergent thinking, where you use logic. You go from a bunch of facts and you come up with a single answer. And then there's lateral thinking, where you combine both types of thinking. And so someone who is an experienced or experienced in metacognition would be able to understand that these things exist, first of all, understand when one is more appropriate than the other, being able to actually choose between them and understand what's most appropriate for the task at hand. And then, of course, they're not limited to these thinking. They would also be very open to the fact that these aren't the only ways that a question can be, or like an issue can be approached. So as metacognition develops, people go from, not being able to examine their own cognitive processes. This can happen for a bunch of reasons, but it can be really difficult to actually examine yourself if you've never thought about it that way. And then, unaware of different approaches to thinking. So just thinking that they have got it right and that's that. And then they slowly come along and they start understanding, oh, maybe someone actually thinks differently than me. Like, what does that look like? But they still require this external motivation to actually do this reflection process. By stage 3, people become, or are said to become, more conscious and actually like apply effort in the metacognition process. So this is, in my opinion, when kind of that turning point of like, okay, you're becoming an empowered thinker. You are, taking it into your own hands. And that's really what I think we want to see. And then, yeah, as they continue, they develop, a repertoire of thinking styles. They can pick and choose. They can actually, rethink things in a new light and reanalyze things. And then, yeah, they take charge, like by stage 5 in each of these different aspects. The emphasis by stage 5 is really that they've not only taken charge for themselves and have, become very self-reflective, but that they're also inspiring others and, being very open about their critical thinking journey. So they continually look for ways to improve. And then the attitudes, I kind of already gave you the gist of this, but when you're starting out, you are really inflexible. You have difficulty seeing that other ways of thinking could be valid. I think this stems from a maturity point, but also just an experience point. If everyone around you has always had the same kinds of thoughts as you, there's no challenge there, right? Folks in this stage, they really struggle with ambiguity, especially when you come from like a memorization background. You want there to be a single right answer, and unfortunately, that's not the reality for the kind of challenges that we're up against. But they also can't really understand the logic of their feedback. So even if you give them, you see their thinking style or their thinking process and you give them feedback on it, they really struggle to understand what the difference is, like what the logic is. By stage 2, they are more willing to engage with the critical thinking learning, but they don't necessarily actively solicit feedback. So if someone, a teacher comes along and tells them what they can improve, maybe they'll work on it, but they're not out in their own time working on it. But by stage 3, that shift happens again, where they start to take on an attitude of humility. They start to kind of embrace uncertainty and are open to more new approaches. Stage 4, that curiosity continues to grow. They start soliciting feedback by themselves. And then by stage 5, they are expected to be openly acknowledging their assumptions and biases. You know, this, like I was saying with the international collaboration, especially, like this can be a really huge tool in getting everybody on the same page and having a productive conversation. And they actually embrace uncertainty. They see uncertainty not as this frustrating thing like someone in stage 1 might, but they see uncertainty as this opportunity to be creative and innovative. And then the last aspect of critical thinking is the cognitive skills. This is very similar to what you'd expect, but in stage 1, very simplistic, single approach. They'll memorize, they have very crude scripts for learning any information. So, you know, if they get homework assignment, they're going to solve it in the same way every time or try to solve it. And I don't know, I assume most of you have taken at least one science course and one arts course. And I hope that you can agree that studying those and learning those in the same way is not productive at all. But that's what a beginning critical thinker misses out on. By stage 2, they can gather information in a focused manner so they can be a little more strategic about it. And they recognize principles of decision making. So like if they are taught, you know, how to do a specific differential diagnosis, maybe they'll understand that process and they'll be able to tell you about it, but they won't actually be able to apply it for themselves. They have difficulty taking that, like those abstract ideas and applying them. But by stage 3, that changes and they're able to actually use those principles in their own life, not just talking about them theoretically. They are able to